So, everyone likes stories, and such is the Talmud as well. Talmud, by the way, many times, in the middle of our conversation, discussions, and law, and logics, it says, Ahu Gavra, a Maisa, no story. And the story helps us to understand certain logics of the Gemara. And perhaps from a very, obviously they're probably holy and more lofty purposes for why the Gemara brings sometimes stories here and there, but I'm saying from a very simple level, perhaps you can say the Gemara is also, the Gemara in Hebrew means teaching, right? Not in Hebrew, in Aramaic. The translation for Gemara is Talmud. Talmud, milashon limud. In Gemara, in teaching, at the same time as the Gemara is teaching us certain things, I feel the Gemara is also teaching us how to teach. It's even the style, even the way the Gemara is kind of set up, has certain tips, certain skills of how to teach. And one of them is stories. It uses stories that happen, real stories, to sometimes make a point, sometimes make a question, sometimes answer, to come to a conclusion. So this is my personal take on it, that sometimes there is stories in the Gemara is also to keep our attention and to teach us how to teach others as well. In any case, let's take a look here at a story. The Gemara explained how Rav's opinion was proved. Omar Rav Chizda said, Hode Rav lav beferush itmar. That opinion of Rav was not stated explicitly. Meaning, it's not like we ask in the Gemara, in the Best Medrash, we say, Shomer shemasar le-shomer, a custodian transferred to another custodian, is it okay, is it not okay? And Rav says, it's fine, he's exempt of liability. No, there was a story. Something happened. They went to Rav, and they asked, what do we do? And Rav stated something. From that story, we kind of draw his opinion in that particular case. Ela michlala. Rather, it was ascertained by implication from a ruling he once issued. What is the story? Dehanhu ginoi, for there was the case of those gardeners. They call Yoma, avumafke de morayu gaba de aisafta. For every day, after they finished the work, they would deposit their hose. Actually, I have to be honest, a word I have no idea in English what it is. But I know it's from Rashi.
A hose. You don't look like that. It's different. It's a hoe. It's like an implement
It's a tool for gardening. How do I know that? Not from the English, but when I was preparing my class. Marayu, Rashi comes and says belaz in French, in Old French. It's called poussière. And poussière, which is Old French, comes here, the translation explaining in Hebrew, that it is this type of keli, this type of tool that you are kind of moving and scraping the dirt. Shemegardim et ha'afar. Okay?
In French can't hang.
It can actually, in this case, it wasn't handy because it's Old French, but sometimes it does come handy.
Yeah,
sometimes you can recognize.
In Russia, they use this translation.
Yeah, belaz. So here Rashi says, in French, belaz, you say poussière. So for every day would deposit their hose with a certain elderly woman for safekeeping. Okay? I guess she was living next to the garden, and they used to have that woman keep the hose for the next day. Yom Achad. One day. Afkedinu legabe chad minayim. One day they deposited the hose with one of their own instead. Meaning, let's say there were 5 gardeners, and that day they said to Moshe, one of the 5 gardeners says, today we want you to keep the hose. And Moshe says, fine, today I'll keep it. Shama kala behilula. Now what happened? Sometime later, that gardener heard the sounds of celebration coming from a wedding hall. And he says, oh, what a simcha. Let me go and say l'chaim, but obviously I can't take the hose. I can't take the keli, the marayu, and bring it to the wedding. So, nofak, ozal, afkedinu legaba de ayisafta. He departed for the hole, and on the way he went and deposited the hole with the safta, with the elderly woman. And guess what? To his mazel, or to their mazel, adeazal ve'asa, igdav marayu. Before he was able to go to the wedding and return, so he went, and before he returned, their hose were stolen. While it was by the safta, while it was by the old woman. So now here's the question. He's a shomer chinam, and by the way, in that case, I assume it is shomer chinam, shemasar le shomer chinam. It is one custodian who gave it to another custodian. It got stolen, and both unpaid custodians are exempt of liability. But here's the question. The other 4 gardeners are coming, and I say, where is it? I say, well, it was by the elderly woman, it got stolen. Now they gave it to me to keep, not to her. So do you say, well, I gave it to somebody who is mentally competent. Then that, this is not a negligence, and therefore there was no negligence on my part. Now that's the first factor. Second factor, what happened? Stolen. What if it had been by me and it got stolen? I would have been exempt of liability, so I'm exempt. That's one way. Or you would say, no, the fact that you transfer to somebody else, that's a negligence.
You use the same stuff that every day.
Yes. Yes. Good comment. I'm going to ask you that comment in a moment. Let me first see what Rav said. And that's a very good, and just a comment, a very good analyzation of the story. But keep that for a moment. So also lekamed Rav. So they went to Rav to ask what to do. Uptare. The gardener came before Rav for a ruling, and Rav said that you're okay. You're exempt of liability.
Why did they go to Rav?
To ask, like you would ask the rabbi, to ask, am I liable? They want to ask.
So they had
the gardener that transferred to the elderly woman, he went to Rav, which was the rabbi at that time, to ask him, what should I do? Am I exempt of liability, or am I liable to return the...
Why he wasn't sure?
Because there is the two sides to the two opinions.
So his friends claimed some...
Could be either that, or could be that we don't know from the story. Could be that the friend says, well, you know, we gave it to you, you gave it to her. That's negligence, right? Could be, or could be that he wanted to do the right thing, and he wasn't sure himself, thinking, on the one hand, I didn't do anything bad. It got stolen. I would have been exempt. But on the other hand, there is something here I did that wasn't correct. They gave it to me. I gave it to somebody else. So maybe there is some liability for that. So he went to Rav. And Rav says, fine. Everything is fine. So there was somebody there, a Talmud, a scholar, who sees the whole story. He saw the gardener. He saw the gardener giving it to the Safta. He heard it was stolen, and he sees, he goes to Rav, and he hears Rav says it's all okay. And the Talmud thought, why Rav says it's okay? Why did Rav say it's okay? So what do you think? I'm asking you the question to you. If you were there, and you see Rav saying to the gardener, fine, you're exempt of liability. And I'm asking you, why do you think Rav exempt him from liability? What would you say?
He knows better. I would say he knows better. I would say he knows better.
He would say that you would trust Rav.
Yes,
Okay, I wouldn't question Rav, but I would want to understand why, the reason why, because when you understand the reason, you can also draw from there, from that particular story, principles for other situations. Okay, so I would like to understand why Rav said that it's exemplar of liability.
Unfortunately,
You read ahead.
I read ahead, so I know the answer.
Okay. So the Talmud couldn't read ahead because there was no Gemara at that time. So the Talmud thought that the reason why Rav said it's okay is because of that particular principle. That shomer, shemasal shomer, is no liability. It's not negligence. Take a look inside. Man de Chaza, Sova, one of the disciples that witnessed these proceedings, thought that the governor was exempt of liability. He thought, Mishum shomer shemasa leshomer patur, because Rav held that a custodian that transferred a deposit to another custodian is exempt from any additional liability. And it was through this disciples' interpretation of Rav's opinion that we said Rav Omar Patur, that we ascertained, that we proved that Rav's opinion is, in a case of a custodian that gives and transfers the object to another custodian, whatever happened to it, this is not a negligence, and the first custodian is Patur. Okay? In other words, Rav never really stated that a custodian who gives the object to another custodian and something happened to it that he would have been exempt of liability, he is also exempt because there is no negligence in transferring to another custodian. No, there was never such a statement from Rav. What it was a story. It was a story of gardening. And it was a story that happened with the Savta. And it got stolen. And the gardener came and he says, you're exempt. So everyone, the Talmud thought that this is the reason. The reason is a custodian gives to another custodian. This is not negligence. And therefore, he's Patur. But the Gemara, read ahead, the Gemara will challenge that. And I would like to challenge you.
What would the student?
No, one second.
This is where I also
Just 1 second. I would like to challenge you to try to think, try to be creative, and try to think that this particular story may not necessarily be a proof that when a custodian transferred to another custodian, this is not a negligence and is exempt of liability. Perhaps this story is different. Perhaps usually when a custodian transferred to another custodian, he is liable. This is negligence. Not supposed to. This particular story, there is a detail there that makes it different, and perhaps you can prove from that story for any other transfer of custodians.
You're asking why this story is not a good
Yes.
example for this.
Why is this night different than any other night? Manishtana, this story from any other situation where a custodian gives to another custodian. This I would like you to try to guess. There is a factor there that makes it a little bit different.
I see two things. First, this gardener he's also an owner. He has his own tool within those tools. So 5 tools from each gardener, and he was one of them. So he had his own piece of equipment there.
So
Maybe yes, maybe not. Maybe his job is with a different aspect of the job, right?
But he
Maybe,
was part of the team for sure.
right, but maybe his job is to advise. He's like the advisory board. You know, today there is all kind of jobs like that. Advisory
But that's
board.
the
He's
same.
a consultant.
It's the same team. It would
Yeah,
be
but
the same.
maybe he's got no tools. Maybe yes, maybe not. But maybe not, because in the story we don't see clearly. Maybe he's got no tool. Maybe he is the consultant of what should we do, how we should do. And the other 4...
He's not a foreign for those 4.
Okay,
Right?
he's not foreign, he's a friend.
The same group.
He's part of the same team, yeah.
And I would say that he's part of the team and maybe he has his own tool. And the second thing would be that it's the same, like I mentioned before, that it's the same woman that they trust on a daily basis. And,
Very good.
so,
Very good. Very good. That's the factor. He didn't just give it to a custodian, where, remember Rabbi Yochanan said, Ein Rutzoni sheyehe pigdoni biyad acher, that Nir can claim, when he gave it to me and I gave it to Lev, Nir can say, well, I give it to you, I didn't give it to Lev. But here is different. Here is a very specific case. I gave it, me the gardener, to a custodian that you trust for 354 days, right? Every day, except for Shabbos and holidays, it's a little bit less. But every day you went ahead and gave it to the Safta. So of course that you trust her, and of course that you rely on her and her environment and her home and anything. So you can't claim to me and say, Sonia, I'm not trusting the other custodian, I gave it to you, not to the other one. You can't do that. So therefore, I could claim, says the Talmud, in this particular case, for sure, according to all opinions, the gardener is going to be exempt of liability. But what about a regular case of transfer? When a custodian transfers to another custodian, perhaps Rav's opinion will be similar to Rabbi Yochanan. Perhaps Rav will say, Chayav, because the owner will claim, this was a negligence. I don't trust the other custodian or his environment. I trusted you, not him. In this case, he can't claim that. So in this case, Rav said he is exempt of liability. So here you see a story, and you see also a way to analyze the story, right? You see that this is not just a simple thing. Every little detail can make a whole difference actually in Jewish law. And by the way, this is a cloud. This is a principle. When you ask a question to a Rav, or you heard, let's say, a psak din from a Rav, you heard a certain conclusion in one particular case. You read an article, on Google, and it says that in this particular case, the Torah says you should do it such and such, and you say, oh, all right, now I've got my the answer to my particular story, and it may not be such an answer because sometimes, very often, one little factor, one little detail can actually change the entire story and the conclusion as well. So, everyone likes stories, and such is the Talmud as well. Talmud, by the way, many times, in the middle of our conversation, discussions, and law, and logics, it says, Ahu Gavra, a Maisa, a story. And the story helps us to understand certain logics of the Gemara. And perhaps from a very, obviously they're probably holy and more lofty purposes for why the Gemara brings sometimes stories here and there, but I'm saying from a very simple level, perhaps you can say the Gemara is also, the Gemara in Hebrew means teaching, right? Not in Hebrew, in Aramaic. The translation for Gemara is Talmud. Talmud, milashon limud, illicitly. Meaning, it's not like we ask in the Gemara, in the Best Medrash, we say, Shomer shemasar le-shomer, a custodian transferred to another custodian, is it okay, is it not okay? And Rav says, it's fine, he's exempt of liability. No, there was a story. Something happened. They went to Rav, and they asked, what do we do? And Rav stated something. From that story, we kind of draw his opinion in that particular case. A point, sometimes make a question, sometimes answer, come to a conclusion. So this is my personal take on it, that sometimes there is stories in the Gemara is also to keep our attention and to teach us how to teach others as well. In any case, let's take a look here, a story. The Gemara explained how Rav's opinion was proved. Omar Rav Chizda said, Hode Rav lav beferush itmar. that opinion of Rav was not stated in Gemara and teaching. At the same time as the Gemara is teaching us certain things, I feel the Gemara is also teaching us how to teach. It's even the style, even the way the Gemara is kind of set up, has certain tips, certain skills of how to teach. And one of them is stories. It uses stories that happen, real stories, to sometimes make